Hey, y'all, bring it on in. You know what it is. So let me try to understand. All moms are narcissists and triggering to you adult or teenage kids all of a sudden? Because it seems to be the word to describe every mom these days to justify how you're treating your mom or why you have become estranged. So, welcome back to MumsTrueTea. I am going to ruffle feathers per usual, but hey, if you're bothered or triggered, good. Maybe you can step outside of your echo chamber just for a moment to hear a different perspective, and maybe you'll have a tad bit more of understanding or empathy, or maybe you won't. And we'll continue to claim you're working on your healing journey that you think gives you the right to point everyone else's flaws out and their imperfections, but somehow not see your own. So let's get into it. Adult children treating their mothers like they are disposable, acting like their existence revolves around your approval. Like you want your moms to jump through hoops just to be worthy of basic human decency. Some of y'all have labeled your moms narcissists without a single medical diagnosis, and you use therapy. You weaponize therapy. And I mean, therapy that's supposed to be used for healing, but you use it as a weapon to justify cutting your parents off and treating them poorly. And mostly, this energy is towards moms, all under the guise of being on a healing journey or because of what you decided to take from going to therapy. Now, before we go any further, let me be clear, because I know I always have to clear this up for you all that come in the comments and drop in, I was abused, my mom is a narcissist. If your mother was truly abusive, toxic, harmful, and awful to your well-being, then yes. Setting boundaries and even severing ties, it is necessary for your peace. But that does not necessarily mean you're healing or healed because you do so. I'm not talking about those situations or those type of moms. So don't come in my comments with the shits like y'all normally do. I'm talking about those of you who are mad at your mothers for simply being human, for not being perfect, for making mistakes, but still loving you, still showing up for you, still breaking her back to make sure you had what you needed and you wanted. And even though some of you are adults, they're still breaking their back to make sure you have what you need and want. But somehow you still have the audacity to act like your mom is the villain in your story. So let's sit with that tea for a minute. I feel like for those of you that have cut your moms or parents off, or you have this disrespect for your mom, okay, so let's keep it real. You want us to chase you the way your toxic ex-boyfriend or girlfriend would do after a breakup. You want us to beg, to plead, to prove ourselves to you over and over again. And why should she ever have to chase you? Why would we ever have to chase you? Because you saw a therapist one time and they told you to set a boundary, and now you're out here acting like you're the only person in the world who's ever been hurt, if you've ever truly been hurt in the first place. Because we know some of you don't go to therapy and tell the full stories. I already said some of y'all go to be heard and not healed, and you got real mad. You give the cliff notes that make everyone around you the villain but you. Or better yet, you want your mom to chase you like your homegirls do when you ghost them. They're trying to find out why you're not talking to them no more. You want her to fight for you, to apologize to you repeatedly, even if she didn't do anything. You want her to explain her trauma to you when that's her story to tell if she chooses to. You want her to break down, to cry, to keep proving over and over again that she loves you, because love to you has been wrapped up in this toxic cycle of you have to prove yourself to me. And quite frankly, you're entitled. But let me ask you something. Is your mother not a human being? Does she not have a limit or a breaking point? Do you not even see or care that your mama is somebody else's child too? I don't think y'all do. Some of y'all are so focused on your own pain or your own created narratives that are false in a lot of cases, that you refuse to acknowledge that your mother had a life before you. She had experiences before you. She had wounds and struggles and trauma and things she had to survive before you. And no, that does not excuse everything, if there is even a thing, but it does mean she is a person the same way you are. She's a person who may not have had the tools, the resources, or the luxury of healing before she had to raise you, a person who is constantly overstimulated, overwhelmed, and in most cases, like mine, always in survival mode and protective mode over you, not even herself. But from what I've seen, a lot of y'all don't care. Y'all really don't care. I mean, and it's a sad reality, but it's the truth. And I keep telling some moms that our kids, they don't care. They don't care about our experiences. They don't care about our trauma. They don't care about how we were always trying to survive because we made it look easy to them. I've heard people straight up say, my parents' trauma doesn't matter. That's not my problem. Or you're not a victim. I had this young lady all up in my comments going in, and you can literally feel her anger through her words, yet she kept saying she was healing. She's working on her healing, and that's why she's healing for her child. She asked me what I considered disrespect or what it looked like because I shared with her that I was estranged from my son because people tend to think that it's always a child that goes no contact with their parent, and some of us are choosing distance over disrespect. I told her exactly what I had experienced. Just some cliff notes, of course, because I don't owe a stranger on the internet any explanation. And she did ask me why I'd chosen to be estranged from my youngest son. And I literally gave her a few points. I said, he's been disrespectful. He's been verbally abusive. He's been physically abusive. He has threatened my home, my husband, other family members, and so forth. Like literally gave her some of the points. And she turned around and said, well, you're not a victim. Like what? And I see this in these new generations. And a lot of you do the same thing. You let somebody explain to you what they want to explain, if you even want to hear what they have to say. And then you say, you're not a victim. That's wild. But your trauma matters. So your pain deserves validation. You deserve to be heard, but your mom's doesn't. And we don't deserve to be heard if we choose to even speak on our past experiences. You can go sit on a therapist's couch and cry about your childhood, but if your mom does the same, she's making excuses or she's playing the victim. If your mom tells you about the things she went through as a child or even as an adult or even as your mother, you roll your eyes and you say, that's not my problem. That's not my responsibility. Or you can show no empathy or compassion. And you're right. It's not your responsibility to heal your mother, just like it's not her responsibility to heal yours, just like it's not a partner's responsibility to heal you if you come into a relationship with your trauma and your baggage. You're responsible for your own healing, and she is also responsible for her own healing. And we're not asking you to be responsible for our healing. But it is your responsibility to decide who you want to be in this world. And if you think it's okay to sit in your unforgiveness, to stay in anger, to be disrespectful, lack empathy, dismiss your mother's humanity, try to control the narrative and the relationship dynamic, and only make things about you, then maybe, just maybe, you're the one who should be labeled as a narcissist. Yeah, I'm going to set my tea on that one. Yeah. Now, let me tell you something personal. I had to forgive my parents without even hearing the words, I'm sorry. I chose to forgive my parents without even hearing the words, I'm sorry. Now, let me tell you something personal. I chose to forgive my own parents without ever hearing the words, I'm sorry. Until maybe like 2 years ago, my mom and I were having a conversation and I shared with her respectfully, the way that you chastised me, it was abusive. those methods weren't necessary. It wasn't a bad child. I was an empath and I was very self-aware all my life, even as a young child. And I was very aware of what my mother was experiencing and very sympathetic and empathetic to her. She'll even say, I remember you were little and you would see me crying on the side of the bed and you would come and dab my little tears with your little napkin. But let me tell you what abuse looks like. And I know some of you have experienced the same thing. But abuse, in my experience, was getting beatings with extension cords, with belts after a shower. You're wet and you're getting switches, what you call branches, being pulled off trees, which you had to go get the switch yourself and then bring it to your parent to get your ass whooped. That's abuse. But I had that conversation with my mom, but I had it respectfully and I got an apology from her. But even if she hadn't apologized, I had already forgiven her because that was my choice. But I'll never get an apology verbally from my dad in this life because he died in 2014. But I healed and I moved on without them having to acknowledge their wrongs, without them ever validating my pain. And do you know why? Because I chose peace and my own healing over bitterness. Because I chose to see them as individuals, as flawed human beings who may have never been given the tools to do better. Human beings who had their own trauma, especially growing up in the South during Jim Crow and coming from parents not far removed from parents who also experienced hella trauma, being only 2 to 3 generations removed from the atrocities of slavery. So I gave them grace. And that's what a lot of y'all are lacking today. Grace. The same grace that you demand from everyone else around you. You refuse to give the woman who gave you life that same grace. Your mother could apologize 1,000 times and you still wouldn't hear her. You still wouldn't forgive her. I've apologized to my younger son several times about a false narrative that he created. I've given him proof it didn't happen when or how he said it did. And he still chooses to believe his own made up story. And your moms have done the same thing. But you choose to stay stuck in your anger, in your unforgiveness, in your unhealed place. And let's bring you back to reality. Let's not act like every single time you needed or wanted something, she wasn't the one making a way out of no way. Who was there when you needed food on the table? Because I'm sure most of you always had something to eat. Who was there making sure your school trips were paid for, you had school clothes, sports, had money to hang with friends, and more, even when she was struggling and she had no help financially, especially if she was a single mom like myself. I was getting a whole $275 a month from my oldest son's dad and nothing from my ex-husband financially, ever. And they both had braces. They both participated in sports or extracurricular activities. They got to go to the movies and hang out with friends. I put down payments on cars. I paid thousands of dollars in legal fees. I've sent money via Cash App, Zelle, and Apple Pay at the whim of a request, even as adults. I've co-signed for cars, one abandoned and never paid the payment, sticking me with them, and they have never went without anything. And this was done by me alone. Who was the one staying up late when you were sick, coming to hospital, sitting by your bedside? Who was the one working extra hours, working on jobs they hated, pulling together every last dime to make sure you had the things you wanted and the things that you needed? Y'all will sit up here and talk about what your mom or what we didn't do, but have you ever stopped for one moment to think about what we did do? You could never even quantify all that a good mother has done for you. Have you ever stopped to consider how exhausting it must have been to be strong every single damn day? To wake up day after day, making sure you had what you needed, even when she was running on empty and she went without, even when she was breaking inside and just plain exhausted. And yet here you are, grown and ungrateful, throwing her away because she wasn't perfect, or she may have said something you didn't like in a way that you didn't like it, or you feel like you're high and mighty because you've gone to therapy and you've learned some things, or you feel like you could be disrespectful because you have the right to do so because you're grown, or you're disparaging her character, labeling her as a narcissist. Wow. Now, if this episode is making you uncomfortable or it has triggered you, good. Maybe that's something you need to sit with. Maybe it's time to do some self-reflection instead of always pointing the finger at your mom. And I'm not saying your feelings don't matter, so please do not come in my comments because you do not comprehend or listen well. Because I already know if you see the clips from this episode, that's exactly what you're going to say, and then you're not going to hear the message. I'm not saying you shouldn't heal. I'm not saying you shouldn't set boundaries. But what I am saying is that if your healing is leading you to be heartless, to cut people off, if your self-work is making you selfish, then it ain't working. A real healed person can set boundaries without being cruel or judgmental. A real healed person can acknowledge their pain without dismissing someone else's. A real healed person can forgive on their own time, but even without an apology, because they understand that their peace is far more important and far more priceless than their pride. Your mama is someone else's child too. Remember that before you throw her away or you feel like you have the audacity to disrespect her, acting like she never meant anything or she's someone in the streets that you can speak to in a way, because karma never loses an address.
Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm so blessed to have a community where I can show up as my most authentic self because I don't know what else to be. Don't forget to favorite the show, leave a review, and subscribe to the podcast on your favorite streaming platforms to stay up to date on new episodes. Subscribe to my newsletter at MumsTrueTea.com. Follow us on all socials at MumsTrueTea, and be sure to share and stay tuned for more thought-provoking topics and real talk on Mom's True Tea with Kendall Lasha. Until next time, remember, you need you just as much as anyone else, so stop playing about you, okay?